Hey guys, welcome back. Dark Alley Network podcast. I'm Bruce Watts, and I'm the partners with Lionel in this endeavor. And our guest tonight is Dwight Cole, who's a longtime friend of mine. We've been friends for over 40 years. Did a lot of rock climbing together. And Dwight just recently retired a couple years ago from being a city planner for Clovis, California. And if you go to Clovis, it's like a cool place. They got a lot of nice stuff that he had a lot to do with. So welcome, Dwight.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I thought I'd start with asking you about yourself, because I've known you for so long, but tell everybody about how you grew up and how you got into what you got into in your family.
Oh, well, I grew up in the LA area. I grew up in a place called Altadena, which is near Pasadena. And my dad was an artist. My mom was a nurse. Kind of grew up alone because they both worked. We were near the mountains. So every opportunity I had, I'd kind of take off and cruise around there. And kind of got my start. And, it's kind of interesting because you and I have something kind of similar, that we have black backgrounds. And I want to know about yours sometime. But mine was the neighborhood I grew up in turned black about mid-1960s or so. All the white people took off Orange County. I ended up growing up in a black neighborhood, and which was cool. It was kind of a different sort of circumstance, and that led to a couple other things. And you may ask those questions. I don't know, but I know you did too, though, Slick. What was your
high school
background
buddies? Yeah, I played basketball. I grew up in Colorado, but just the guys I was closest to were those guys. And then, when I go back now to our reunions or whatever, that's who I hang out with and everything. Yeah, we have a long history. But we used to take our albums to the library in high school, and in the old days, right? You take the record album, the lady in the library puts it on there and plays it, and then we had our little headphones and we'd go in our little steady booths. But I don't think we did that much studying. Just listening to the music, and but they got me into that. And you should tell about your Sunday night DJ job.
Yeah. Huh. So this voice that I got, it got deep when I was about 14 years old, and so people kept telling me, "Oh, you should be on the radio." It's like, oh yeah, I got the face for radio. Maybe I got the voice, and I got to try this a little bit. And a buddy and I did some promos for a radio program, and I got hired. I'm not going to say what station it is, but I got hired as a black disc jockey when I was 17 years old, and we did. It was soul music, and it was like a late night, early morning program. And the funny thing was, I'm still geeky, but I was a real geeky kid back then, and this white kid with glasses on and long hair, and I would spin records. But I would get these calls from gals wanting to ask me out for dates, and they had no idea I was a geeky white guy. So it was kind of funny.
And they were 30 years old or something, and you're 17.
I had no idea, but I was just scared shitless, going, man, I hope they're not outside the door when I wrap up, But but yeah, I kind of did that for a while and realized that was not my cup of tea, and
you probably did good.
Moved on to some other stuff.
And that was wasn't it Sunday nights?
It was Sunday nights, yeah. It was Sunday nights and early morning. I guess it was early morning Mondays. But yeah, that was.
See, I remember. I don't even remember what year it was, but that Clovis newspaper called me up because they were doing a story about Dwight, because he's the city planner of Clovis, and putting it in the local paper. And you probably gave him a few names, call for your friends to talk about you or something. And then I told him about his high school DJ thing. And he goes, "Hey, you told them about that?" He goes, "That's all I heard about at work for a while." And they were like, "Yeah, and tell them what your name was." Tell them what your name was.
My name was Mojo Harris.
That's classic. Some 17-year-old white kid.
The things you do. Yeah, the things you do growing up.
Hey, and how old were you when you were doing the velodrome racing kind of thing.
That was about the same time. Yeah. So I think I was like 16, 17 or so when I was doing the velodrome stuff, and which was interesting too. But
tell people about what the velodrome is like with no brakes on the bike and the track and all that.
It's fast and it's tricky because you're out there with a whole bunch of others, and you're on a bike that has it's direct coupled to the back wheels, so it's not like you can coast. It's like once your feet are in the pedals, man, you're moving, and
no brakes.
And no brakes,
yeah.
And you just go, and you're on this wooden track that's partially banked. And I didn't do real good at it, so I didn't do it very long. But it was pretty wild, and you'd have some good wrecks. You'd hit people in front of you, or people run you over.
There's people have seen it on the Olympics.
Yeah, and you'd be locked onto this bike. You couldn't really hop off of it. You were just sprawling on the floor, hoping somebody didn't run you over. Yeah.
And then, how old were you when you started climbing?
I think it had been first climb when I was 6 years old, because I had a brother that was interested in rock climbing, and so he took me out rappelling, and we did some Jumaring on bridges. Jumaring is where you're going up a rope with ascenders, and we did a bunch of that kind of stuff. But it really wasn't until I got to San Luis Obispo that I found out what rock climbing really was. And there's good climbs over there, and there's some people that took me out. I fell in love with it. It was just, it was fun. It was scary, and it was good. It was just fun people to be around. Really weird people, as you know. And but yeah.
I mean, we both. Yeah, I mean, as far as getting into climbing, like you and I are both doing it for like 50 years, basically.
Yeah.
That's how old we are. But why? So you went to San Luis Obispo. But was that? Did you go there and know you wanted to major like in an architecture kind of world? I mean, or did you just go there and find out later that you were into that?
No, I wanted to do some pre-med, and I thought I wanted to be a doctorate earlier on, and that just I didn't have the head for it. So I thought, well, architecture sounds pretty cool, and I put my hat in the ring for Cal Poly, and that was like in the mid 70s. I couldn't get in the architecture programs. I just didn't have the grades for it or that kind of stuff. I got in the city planning program. And I thought, well, I'll do the first couple of years there and move over to architecture, because it's the same program for the first couple of years, and then you can move on to something else. I thought I just like city planning, and that kind of catalyzed my whole career for the last 40 years. Well, I guess it's still going on.
Yeah, because you have a part-time gig now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're working for yourself.
Yeah, I started my own business. But yeah, it was. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I didn't end up as an architect, because that's a rough field, and what I ended up doing with Clovis was really fun.
Yeah, and if people go to Clovis and look around and kind of cruise the town, they'll see some pretty cool stuff. I mean, you guys did a lot of, I think, interesting stuff.
Well, and it's a valley. The valley's interesting. I didn't know that much about the valley till I moved here, and I thought it was hot, it was flat, it was foggy, it was I didn't know much about it, and I didn't think I was going to stay here very long, but I really liked it. I liked the culture, and honestly, I think it's like the last great place in California. LA's gotten screwed up, the Bay Area's gotten screwed up. You could do things right here in the valley, and we still have an opportunity to do that. And the other thing I think is cool is that every town is different, and I'm sure Lindsay is different than Exeter, is different than Visalia, and so each town kind of has its own personality. And being a planning director for one of these communities, you can actually work with that and help develop that personality. And
that's cool. You guys did a lot of cool stuff in Clovis, I think.
It was fun. It was a good city council, because they'd let you do stuff. They'd let you take a risk, and they're also good about giving you credit for what you did, which I think a lot of councils and board of supervisors don't let you do. as a as an employee or as civil
Yeah,
servant.
a lot of politics.
Yeah,
Of course, then you're a climber, so then you're like, oh, wait a minute, now I'm right here by Yosemite and
yeah,
all these
yeah,
cool
yeah, yeah.
climbing. We've been exploring around the Sierra for decades, and there's still all kinds of stuff that we both know. Nobody's ever even been there hardly. And it's like an endless playground of rock climbing stuff.
Yeah, we've had all sorts of adventures, Slick. Yeah,
Yes.
more than I can remember or care to admit to, maybe. But somehow we survived them all, which is actually kind of cool.
Yeah, I could throw this in there right now. Like Dwight basically saved my life because we were in the backcountry and we worked for an organization called Sierra Treks, and we were like wilderness guides. So we were on a 12-day backpacking trip thing with people. But what our job was is we were taking in extra food for the group, like we'd hump in these loads and we'd have like a pack horse maybe or something and take a bunch of stuff. But I'm diabetic, and then I went in, I got sick and I thought I had something wrong with me, and I wasn't really doing my job very good with what I should have been doing. But the long story short, by like the next day, I was feeling really sick that night, and by the next day in the morning, like he couldn't even wake me up hardly or nothing. So Dwight went back down. I think we were only about a mile from there, right? The ranger cabin. There was a ranger cabin where we'd actually stayed the night before, like a Forest Service ranger place. And he knew where the radio was in there. So he went and called on this radio and got like a Forest Service helicopter to fly probably about 20 miles, right? To get me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the dude made some kind of crazy landing where Dwight was showing him where I was. And the guy, got through all these trees and took me, and I got life flighted to Reno, Nevada, and then I was in a coma for 6 days. Like I wouldn't have been alive. But Dwight's pretty savvy with being like a EMT, like an emergency medical tech. Excuse me. And he had like experience. I'm lucky I was with the right person because I could think of climbing buddies of mine that if I was with them, I wouldn't be talking to you guys right now, because I think I came pretty close to not being around. Like the number they gave me in the hospital of my blood sugar was like off the charts, like for being alive. So you got me out of there just in time, dude.
Well,
I appreciate it, or we wouldn't be talking right
now. Yeah, but I can't take credit for that. And
you can.
The reason I say, well, and a guy named Jimmy Gill saved my life. So I guess if there's anyone to thank, it's probably Jimmy Gill, because I wouldn't have been around. But
where were you guys? Like, tell about that a little bit.
Oh, well, Jimmy was a climbing partner. That sounds like it's in the past since he's still around, but we don't climb anymore. But we did a bunch of climbing over 20, 30 years, and we ended up doing a around the world kind of climbing expedition when we were between girlfriends. But we bought these things called paragliders, and now they're pretty mainstream. They've kind of taken the place of a lot of like hang gliders and stuff like that. But at that time, they were pretty rudimentary. They were basically like a flying parachute, and we bought these things. We traveled around the world. We did a bunch of climbing with them. And you'd climb a peak, and then you'd fly off the top. So all you had to do was climb up, and then you'd end up in base camp in 10, 15 minutes. And we flew these in places. We flew in Africa and Egypt. Egypt was probably the coolest because we flew around by the pyramids, which was we didn't even know we were supposed to be doing that. And the war with Bush and Saddam were just about to break out. There's no tourists around, but that's a long story. We come back here to Pine Flat Reservoir, went flying out there, and I wrecked, and I ended up breaking my back. I fell about 100 feet on my butt and broke my back and ruptured a bunch of internal stuff. And luck have it, Jimmy found me and went and got help, and the CHP flew me out. Mm-hmm. So That was
We
about
both got helicopter rides.
we got yeah, and
I,
you tried to fly yours. I
I
heard.
know, I don't remember it, but they said I was so far out of it.
Yeah.
They said I got in there and I was kind of like struggling with the guy trying to fly the helicopter. I don't even know. Like, I don't even have any remembrance of riding in one. So, like, I got to ride in one. I don't even know anything about it.
Yeah.
Gosh.
But you know, I mean, I'm not much an organized religion, but I think the proof of God to me was that there was stuff available to get you out. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what was going on with you.
Well, you were trying. Yeah.
I knew you were going downhill pretty quick. And I think we were doing some of the wrong stuff. I think we were giving you like sugar when we probably shouldn't. We should have been doing something else.
Well, yeah, but it was more what I did. Yeah, I didn't realize. I thought I got sick and I didn't check that stuff as much as I should have been.
But
I got lucky in here.
it was like, oh my God, I was just praying we were going to be able to get you out. And I didn't know if it was going to work or if I could get to that ranger station, but it all came together and they got you out. And I seem to remember you were in pretty bad shape there in Reno for a week or two.
6 days.
Yeah.
I think they kept telling my family, like, oh, he'll be in a coma for like 24 hours. But then they kept thinking every 24 hours it would be another, and then it was 6 days. But, and of course, I didn't know anything because I was out of it, right? Then I wake up like 6 days later and I'm like, why are all these people here, to visit me and stuff? I thought, like, I was still pretty drugged up. So they finally got me out of the bed one day after like a week. And these two people are walking me, one on each arm, down the hallway. And there's all these people in some office. And I go, what are all these people doing here? Is it like my birthday party or something? Like I didn't, I was only halfway even, like with my brain even, functioning or something. So,
dude,
yeah.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Wow. You wouldn't have educated these two, man. That's
these off-camera people.
Yeah.
They'd be like, well, maybe. I mean, if you ask these guys, they'd probably go, well, I think he did actually have some kind of brain damage. Because you could argue, the point. Like, I think I got out of it lucky. But then people are laughing. And my family was pretty freaked out. Like my wife, and every day they kept saying, well, he'll probably come out of it today. It was like 6 days of that. Like they didn't even, like our boss, this guy Dave Willis is our boss, right? He calls up my wife in the night and goes, hey, have you heard from Slick? That's my nickname, by the way, you guys. But she goes, no, I thought he was working for you, like in the backcountry, they don't have phones, or anything. And he's like, well, I can't find it. Like Dwight told me whatever. And then like he couldn't find me in the hospital in Reno because I think they lost my paperwork on the helicopter. Like I had stuff with me that we carried. And then so they had me in there as like Bruce Watson or something. So they finally figured out which Reno hospital I was actually in. Because like they didn't even know where I was, And then of course my family flipped out. They got in the car and drove and picked my wife up and drove for 8 hours, all night to get over there to the other side of the Sierra. So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Well, what was amazing, and you didn't get to witness it, but how the dude flew the helicopter in to get you. I'd never seen anything like that, and how he knew. I mean, he landed in trees, and how he knew where the tips of his blades were at, I have no idea. But they
like
were
a narrow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I mean, it's funny. Like, I don't look back on that with that much. Like, it wasn't an awful thing for me because I wasn't even awake. And then after that, then I stayed in the hospital a whole second week. Just back in a regular room, like recovering. But like my friends would come by, like our friends from Sierra Treks, like John Cowan and Lowy, and we'd all be just sitting around laughing about stuff. It was like, for me, it was almost like a 2-week vacation where I almost died and I didn't know it or something. It was like, it really didn't. It was weird. It's like, I had this one roommate in there though, like a gang member guy, and like I was in a room with another person. They kind of had a curtain in between us, so you sort of had privacy or something. And this kid was like really young and he had got shot or something. So his gang member buddies came in at like midnight one night when the visiting hours are way gone, but the nurse probably just looked at him and said, oh, go ahead. Like she's probably afraid of him or something. And they didn't bother me at all, but it was like you're in the middle of the night, these guys are in there, like talking to the guy for an hour. And I I wasn't going to say anything, but that was unusual. They still talk about some of your worldwide travels. I mean, all the places you've gone to climb and stuff, or maybe more. You already mentioned it. But.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've done a lot of climbing through the States, kind of like you have. Did a lot in Yosemite and Tuolumne Meadows. And then most recently was of course finding Courtright, which was just wide open. It was just amazing that really nobody had explored that before, and all the cool stuff that's up there.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's kind of gaining popularity, but it's nowhere like Yosemite or something where you're waiting in line to get on a climb or whatever.
Yeah, less crowded, but wonderful. For everybody that doesn't know, that's like up above Shaver Lake here in is that Fresno County?
Yeah, it's Fresno County.
Yeah, so you drive up to Shaver Lake, up in the mountains, then you do a whole nother hour almost and go up to this other place called Courtright Reservoir, which is really beautiful. Yeah. It's like 8,000 foot elevation, right?
It's like 8,000 foot, and I think the cool thing about it is most people think about climbing as it being very steep, or they see the like free solo or something on El Capitan or whatever, and Courtright is just so different because it's these rounded domes, but you're climbing on things that are about the size of the edge of a dime, right? And so you're kind of smearing on these things, and it's barely there, and it's tricky,
Yeah.
Well, right? Going to Power Dome and those things.
We've been there.
Yeah, but yeah. So I spent a lot of time there, a lot of time in Yosemite. I tried El Capitan 3 times, once with you.
Yeah.
I made it once. That was back in 1977, which is like ancient history. But
when you're only like 20 years old.
Yeah, kind of like beginner's luck, and that was a 5-day trip at that point. So there's a lot of sleeping out on ledges and being cold and thirsty and that kind of stuff.
And now you always read all these climbing magazines or whatever and there's all these dudes who are climbing it in like 4 hours and stuff.
Yeah, like they do that route in like 4 hours, 3 hours.
They have like a rope between them. They just go running up the thing.
It took 5 days to do it.
Yeah, it's old school.
But I did that. Did some climbing in Thailand, which is awesome. I think did about 3 trips to Thailand, where you're climbing on these towers that are just coming right out of the ocean, and cheap beer, and the people were nice, and the rooms were cheap. Did some climbing in Kenya, Kenya was really cool.
Yeah.
We did Mount Kenya and some stuff in the Himalaya. And a lot of Sierra stuff.
I still remember in the 80s when we went to Mexico, way down to Mexico City to climb the big volcanoes down there. They're like 17, 18,000 foot. They're like some of the bigger mountains in North America. But we were just shocked. Like, you stayed at this little lodge that was between these 2 high peaks, which they're all volcanoes, by the way, down there. But we like took a bus from the airport all the way for an hour to some town, and that cost like $1. I'm talking about like 45 years ago. And then we got a taxi in the town to get up to the mountains. You had to drive all the way up to where that lodge thing was. And I remember we gave the guy like $5 to, ride the taxi for a half hour. Okay. And then we got to this lodge place that we stayed, and there were like bunk beds in a dormitory kind of room where you just threw your sleeping bag out, and that cost like $1 a night to stay there. And then they had like meals for a couple bucks, and all this stuff. It was just like a different era. Crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, and like Mount Kenya was like that too, because you could hire porters, which sounds awful. It sounds like you're hiring somebody to carry your loads, but that was their business. That's how they made their money. And this dude Peter that we picked up, he hauled like 2 loads, man, like 2 loads up to the McKinder hut before Jimmy and I ever got there. This guy was in great shape. And we didn't find out till afterwards that he'd never been to the top of Mount Kenya. And so he'd done this approach for years, never stood on the peak. And it was like, we're going, shit, if we knew that, we would have taken him up, you know? We would have
Oh, you
paid for
found out
his.
even after you did it.
Yeah, after he did it, it's like, God, that guy deserved to
He
go to the
he wouldn't have
top.
had any trouble
And,
making it either.
you know, we were kind of hacks compared to what this guy could do. And
Well,
when he carried loads, he didn't carry it in a pack. He had like a duffel bag. He shoved like 40 pounds of gear in a duffel bag, carried over his shoulder. And, you know,
and he
we're
was
all
pretty,
decked out with packs and
like
stuff
he was
like
young.
that. Yeah, it was probably 25 or something
Yeah.
like that. And yeah, that was.
I didn't remember this, but when you said that, it made me remember when we went to Mexico and we climbed this one called Orizaba, which is about 18,000. And we had to hike up to this little hut. And this guy came to where we parked my buddy's car because my buddy lived down there, and, you know, getting all our stuff out to carry it. And this guy had a little donkey, and you paid him to strap these packs on the sides of the donkey and take you to the hut. And then from there on, you had to just climb the mountain. But this, you're giving the guy yeah. Hey, so I guess something that would interest me is like when you talked about being an FM DJ at that young age and how the neighborhood kind of changed. What was that like as far as like how different it was from being at home with your parents, or how you got into that?
Well, you know, like in LA, you heard of the Watts riots. And so what was that, like 1964 or something
Seven,
like
I think.
that,
Yeah.
maybe? And so the neighborhood I grew up in was kind of a rural neighborhood. It was kind of horsey and, you know, kind of Wild West. Well, after the Watts riots, I think a lot of people got really, you know, a lot of the white community got really scared and kind of going, man, we got to move someplace else. And, you know, we don't know what's happening in LA. And there was this thing, and from actually an urban planning perspective, it's kind of interesting because it was like the white population moved down to Orange County, which was very conservative at the time. And I don't know why my folks didn't go, but they didn't. And I ended up being the only white kid on the block, or maybe 2 or 3 blocks around, which was cool because it was everyone got along. Some of the kids in the area were kids of like Jet Propulsion Laboratories was there, Caltech was there, and so you had some of these parents that were working for those facilities that were there too. So it was a broad spectrum. You had Chinese and Filipinos and all sorts of folks there, but it was predominantly black. But so Pasadena, the school district started busing. And that was when I think I was like in junior high. And that's when things got really bad because I would get bused to a white school with all my black friends, all my black neighbors. We get bused to some sort of white school. And then this whole racial unrest was like, well, they couldn't determine where I was at or who I was. And so, you know, I'd get beat up periodically, and my friends would kind of try to take care of me or whatever, but that really got icky. And so that was like in junior high, and then I ended up going, my folks tried to reform me a little bit and sent me to a all-boys Catholic high school, which sounds awful, but it was great. It was a good education. It was a big change, and it kind of got me back on track for doing stuff that was good. And so that was when folks were going, well, you should be a DJ. You sound like you should be on the radio. And I had done those promotionals and got hired on. The dichotomy was all of a sudden I ended up this geeky white kid as a black DJ on this black station after all this rigmarole, and then of course getting asked out by all these black women. They had no idea I was a geeky white guy, but it was cool. It was really, it was fun, and so I think that kind of set the stage for me a little bit in terms of my career with city planning and whatnot. Going, culture matters, and
That's cool.
Somebody had asked me, okay, so what kind of persona did you have on the radio? Well, it was like Teddy Pendergrass was really big at that time, and so it was like a slow talking black voice, and we're here to celebrate the evening with you, and we want you to enjoy your time, and it was you know, and that's so long ago I can't do it anymore. But it was funny, and then the calls would come in going, "Hey, Mojo, can we take you out?" You know, it's like, oh God,
Is Harold Melvin in the Blue Notes?
Let me get home in one piece, you know.
Did you play Barry White?
Barry White, yeah, it was, yeah.
Al Green.
So, but you know, all in all, it was a good experience, and I think even if my career in city planning, I don't know who all is probably listening to this podcast, but Clovis is kind of known as a white community, and you'd hear from racial minorities going, you know, we feel like we stand out here. We don't feel like we're welcome here. It's like we'd rather kind of dissolve in the Fresno where we can end up in the woodwork. And I think a lot of planners probably just didn't understand really what that meant and what it meant not to fit in because of just the way you looked. And for me, it was a different experience. But I think one of the great challenges with Clovis was going, how do you make people feel inclusive? And that's not just a buzzword. It's like you want them to feel comfortable. What are things to do in Old Town? How do you bring the kids over from Fresno State that aren't there? So it becomes multicultural and multi-generational. And I think a little bit of my background probably played into that in terms of going, hey, this is the kind of stuff that really makes a community a community. So
yeah,
that was a long answer to something you asked.
That's cool. Yeah. Hey, but because you guys built some kind of green, wouldn't you say you have like a green bike or hiking type of situation there or something? Like you did in Clovis, like a
we did, yeah, we did a
or
bunch of trails, and that was a challenge because there was an old rail line that ran through town. We got a Rails to Trails grant. The tracks were going away. And we got a lot of pushback from folks going, well, we don't want a trail in our backyard because people are going to use the trail and rip us off and stuff. And, you know, but you get that turned around over a period of time, and then you get neighborhoods that are going, well, where's our trail? Man, we want a trail. And it's like, you know, all this stuff takes time. And I think that was probably one of the wins in Clovis was doing that and getting it more inclusive of folks. And yeah.
But so you did that for 40 years?
40 years.
What are you doing now? I mean, I know you do have your own business, but maybe what's going on nowadays?
Well, just a little backstory on Clovis. When they offered me the job, they said I had to stay there 2 years. And I remember thinking, holy shit, man, 2 years is a long time in the valley. You know, it's like, what? I don't know how I'm going to survive in the valley. This is just what's
too
going
hot.
on.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because I look back on it. It's like, well, that was a 40-year career, and it was great. And one of the reasons I think it was great is that so many city planners or city managers or folks like that never stick around long enough to see the thing that was a piece of paper on their desk turn into reality, or that they can see people actually use something that was developed. And being there long enough, I got to see the things that worked, and I got to see some mistakes that I wish I didn't make. But
yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
But now you're doing your own kind of a planning.
Yeah, so I started a planning design firm. So I do urban design. I'm working on a couple master plan communities right now. Working with a community for redesigning or redeveloping their downtown area. Another project is for Oakhurst, which is for the gateway to Yosemite. Trying to make it more user-friendly, like be able to walk, you know, connecting sidewalks that aren't there yet, or bikeways or things for people to do when they have a hotel room and they're waiting to get to Yosemite the next day and stuff. So there's some things that are coming out there that are fun to work on.
Man, I was just like you in a way. Like I lived up the coast, and I started coaching basketball in the early '80s, and then this job came open in Bakersfield. Like a varsity boys basketball high school thing. And I went like in February because somebody moved out of town, so I got this job. When I got to Bakersfield, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to live here for too many years, because you weren't used to it. And then I basically stayed in the valley. I left a little bit up to Idaho one year, but I mean, I've basically been here the whole time since. And like Lindsay's by far the longest job I ever had in my life, like teaching in Lindsay School District for over 20 years. Before that, I was kind of a little bit here and there. Not like I just moved every year, but yeah, the valley does kind of grab a hold of you.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, right? It's like what sets Lindsay apart from other communities? It's like I had no idea this was here, or that it had an art community, and that how cool is that? And it's those kind of things that make communities interesting. You poke around and find those kind of things, and and then people spend a lot of money to buy a house in a place that they're going to raise their kids and whatnot, and their community ought to represent them. They ought to be able to enjoy living in the community that they moved to. So I'm just excited about Lindsay and seeing this, guys.
Yeah, this is all cool. Dark Valley
cool.
stuff.
Yeah.
We've been through some shit.
Yeah.
What's that?
So we've been through some city managers, but
yeah, you have, huh?
It's a cool town to live in.
Well, but you got the adaptive reuse of the packing shed.
Mm-hmm.
That, we drove by that tonight. That looked lively. There were people in there.
McDermott Fieldhouse.
Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah. So there's some good ideas that.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've been around Lindsay now for over 25 years, and there's a lot of people here that are like family for me now. Yeah, it's like become pretty special. Yeah. It's a cool place.
Mm-hmm. Well, and kind of just thinking about my career a little bit, and just kind of sitting in this setting is so many of the folks I worked with, their parents came here because they were farm workers, and that the generation of kids that are coming up are doing amazing things in terms of downtown revitalization and preserving cultures. And the planners I had on my crew, it was a diverse lot. It wasn't all white planners, and so many people brought so much stuff to. One of them was a Japanese guy. Of course, his parents were in an internment camp.
Mm-hmm.
And so their perspective on the valley is different than the Armenian culture that's here, or the Southeast Asian culture. And that is so cool. And it's one of those things that you need to be able to celebrate, I think, in community design.
Yeah, Lindsay has some history with Japanese culture, people that were in internment camps, their families and stuff. Yeah. Which is one of America's kind of awful mistakes, to say the least.
Yeah.
The city, the park, named after a city in Japan, it's Kaku. The people right here, or the olive bowl.
Oh, is that right?
They have like a sister city named
in
Japan.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that.
They used to run the student exchange program too in Japan. So I don't know if they still do it or not, but there's a lot of interesting things here and there you can see too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah, I've enjoyed my years in the valley. Like now, I don't think I'd go anywhere else.
Well, and you were an educator. You look at all the lives that you touched. In your 20 years or 22 years here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm always running into old students of mine, like over at the Orange at the bar, Hey, Watts, what's up? They buy you a beer or something. And I'm like, and then like, some of these, like, there's guys that were my students that are well over 40, at this point. Like old guys. But I probably have students that have grandkids. Yeah, I think I do.
Yeah, so what does it feel like to be in your 60s? Did you ever think you'd be here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I'm pretty sure, I mean, if you talk to almost anybody about it, like all the years that you're young, you don't think about that stuff. It's only, kind of when, I mean, you're aware of it in a way, but the closer you get to it, the more it's real. But, yeah, there's a lot of changes. I mean, I think you and I are in the same boat of probably enjoying retirement because we have so many things that we do anyway, that we like it,
I don't think we're any smarter.
Yeah. You might be dumber if you can get there. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But, yeah, so, yeah, it's great to have you come and talk to us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And I appreciate getting invited here and seeing the art and the culture. This is cool. This is a cool town.
Yeah, the whole thing with Dark Alley Movement, it's like a cultural thing, It's like an idea. Yeah, I dig it. But you guys, when you get on YouTube, Dark Alley Network is what it's going to be called. So we'll have a series of these every couple of weeks. We're going to try to do it and do the news. I think we got that coming up soon with our friend Denise doing the news. So that'll be cool. And then we'll have a whole variety of guests, people to talk to. So it'll be fun. It'll be all over the map too. We don't have like really a single kind of agenda or any certain kind of person you have to be on here or anything. It's just going to be interesting. So,
can you do a quick promo for Dark Alley in the podcast, like off the top of
your radio voice?
With your radio voice, yeah.
Just from what you know about us so far and what you see we're into.
Dark Alley, cool, daring, no flies on that.
Hey, we could wrap it up with that. Yeah, thanks, Dwight.
Why they always tripping? We do this every day. They must not know how we do it where we stay. In Cali, we bout it, we bout it, we bout it. In Cali, we bout it, we bout it.